الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. And the translation: Blessed is he in whose hand is domination, and he is over all things competent. He who created death and life to test you, as to which of you is best indeed, and he is the exalted in might, the forgiving. He who created 7 heavens in layers, you do not see any in the creation of the most merciful any fault. So return your vision to the sky, do you see any breaks? Then return your vision twice again, your vision will return to you humbled, while it is fatigued. And we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and have made from them what is thrown at the devils, and have prepared for them the punishment of the blaze. Sadaqallahul azim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ryan. May Allah give His bless us all. Thank you. So the next one, we have a welcoming speech from our head of department. Please welcome Dr. Khalifa Muhammad Ali Assoc, MSE. Time is yours. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, hamdan katsiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi kama yuhibbu rabbuna wa yardah. Wa nusalli wa nusallim wa nubarik ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man sara ala nahjihi wa istanna bi sunnatihi ila yaumiddin. Wa ba'd. Brothers and sisters, welcome to guest lecture. It is my pleasure to gather here to partake in a special occasion, a guest lecture by Dr. Eskandar. We are truly honored to have such an esteemed individual raise us in their knowledge and expertise. I would like to take a moment to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for joining us today. Your presence here signifies your commitment to learn, growth, and the pursuit of knowledge. It is through such events that we enrich our minds and broaden our knowledge and horizon, inshallah. It is my privilege to introduce briefly our esteemed guest. His name is Dr. Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Eskandar Shah, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Hamad in University of Qatar, inshallah. Today, inshallah, we will share with you the topic entitled "The Government Policy in Strengthening Islamic Finance: The Case of Qatar." Actually, I think this is a very interesting topic because Qatar has something that we don't have. For example, Qatar has Islamic financial center, if I'm mistaken, Doctor. Qatar, as well as Dubai, and also Kazakhstan and also Malaysia have already Islamic finance center. And in Indonesia, we are still in progress, Doctor. Inshallah, we are still continue to struggling to develop Islamic financial center as well. Inshallah in Jakarta. Maybe that's one of the most interesting, I think, point that we can learn from Qatar. Maybe it is also interesting because the topic related to the government policy. Yeah, we will learn how the government of Qatar, support Islamic finance. Yeah, inshallah. Okay, I encourage all of you to keep an open mind and actively participate and take advantage of the valuable insight that will be shared by our Honorable Dr. Iskandar. Lastly, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to lecturers and also students who made the event possible. Their dedication and hard work have made today's events a reality. Once again, thank you all for being today. Let us embrace this opportunity to learn and be inspired by the remarkable wisdom that our guest, Dr. Iskandar, inshallah, will share the topic to all of us. Without further delay, please, I welcome the doctor for lecturing today, inshallah. And once again, thank you very much. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Khalifa. So our next business is we're gonna take a look at our guest CV. So before Dr. Eskandar start, I would like to read a little CV. Dr. Muhammad Eskandar is an Associate Dean, Academic Affairs, and Associate Professor, Islamic Finance at Hamad bin Khalifa University, Qatar Foundation. Previously, he was the Associate Professor and Associate Dean of School of Graduate and Professional Studies, INCEIF, correct me if I'm mistaken. His research is published in well-regarded academic, and Dr. Iskandar is also a financial sector specialist consultant for World Bank, advisor for Brunei Institute of Leadership and Islamic Finance, Brunei. He also mentored for Upledge and technical advisor for GFI Vintech. He was also involved in several consultancy projects with government agencies and financial institutions such as Ministry of Energy, Malaysia, Afghanistan, Ministry of Finance, CIMB Islamic Bank, and also Responsible Finance Institute and ZICO Sharia advisor. That is a short CV about Dr. Iskandar. And now let's take next to, before we start, may I have your attention, please, because the presentation is about to begin. And in this occasion, we would like to have a presentation from our special guest lecturer. This presentation is going to talk about the government policy in strengthening Islamic finance, the case of Qatar. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome the presenter here to deliver the presentation. Please welcome Dr. Eskandar. Time is yours.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Thank you so much, Brother Moderator, Brother Ali, and also Dr. Khalifa for your kind introductions as well. And also all the lecturers who are actually teaching this particular module. So I'm honored to be here today. It's still early morning here in Qatar. It's about 9 o'clock, not so morning, because here our morning starts around 4:30. That's the time that Fajr ends in Qatar, unfortunately, during summer. So it's not so morning, but still morning compared to Jakarta. So Dr. Irfan is a good friend. I heard he also been recently appointed as a dean of the faculty. Congratulations to him. Uh, in fact, when he was doing PhD, we used to stay together in the same apartments. So that's how close I am to Dr. Irfan. So when he invited me to give a lecture, I cannot say no for two reasons. Number one, he's a good friend. And number two, I know that EPB is a very good university in Indonesia and perhaps in the region as well. Maybe one day it'll be probably one of the top universities in the world. And we know that there are many young people who have graduated from EPB is doing very well in Indonesia and other parts of the world. So I think this is a great opportunity for me to be sharing some of the things that I know about Sukuk, about capital market, and also my recent experience in Qatar with these potential leaders of the Muslim world. Because I always believe that Indonesia is a very important part of the Muslim world. Right now is doing very well economically, and also even in Islamic finance and also social finance. So there's a lot of solutions that are coming out from Indonesia. So I thought this is a good idea of sharing my thoughts and also, listen to some of you guys as well. Yeah, but we are a bit short of time, so I'll probably give about half an hour lecture, inshallah. And then I would prefer if I answer your questions, because listening to someone more than half an hour is not easy. Trust me, I was a student before and I'm also now a lecturer, and especially teaching young generations, having attention more than 30 minutes are not an easy business. Okay, so I'll give a lecture for 30 minutes. And then after that, we can actually bounce questions and answers. Although the topic is about Qatar, you have to remember that Qatar is a very small country. It's just like emerging. A lot of things that they're doing is basically at a very infant stage. So a lot of things that I'm going to say is also about my experience in Malaysia. So I was in Malaysia after my PhD for about 10 years. I was working with INSEF, a university under Central Bank of Malaysia dedicated to Islamic finance. And then I wanted something else. I just want to do something different. And then I decided to come to Qatar. So I've been here for almost 2 years now. And I'm not sure how long, but for now I'm here. So I'll just be sharing my experience in Malaysia and also in Qatar. Unlike a typical academician, I'm involved a lot of industry engagement, especially with the World Bank and also some of the banks. So that gives me a different perspective about knowledge and about the practical side. So that is something that I really enjoy about my career. So I can do both. So this lecture about having a perspective both from academic and also from industry perspective too. So moving on, can you see my slides moving? Can you see my slides moving? Is it moving? Is it okay? Is it moving? Yes? No? Yes? Moving?
Is it moving, sir?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. Because there was a time I was giving a lecture and then I already went to the 10 slides and apparently for the audience, they're still stuck on the first slide. So if it's not moving, so please let me know. So my lecture going to be divided into 3 parts. The first is just basically ensuring that all of you have a very proper understanding of what Sukuk is all about, and then give some ideas about the role of government in general, what they are doing and so on and so forth. And then eventually we move a bit on Qatar, because there's nothing much I can talk about Qatar. Okay, because they are very young, and unlike many other countries, they don't have money problem. Okay, in fact, they have a lot of surplus. So the need of having Sukuk is more into a private sector as compared to the government sector, but I will talk about it. So a lot of my explanation will also come from the Malaysian experience. So let's do the first part first. Let's have a very good understanding, right? I mean, so I'm sure you have understood it very well, but just to to kickstart the lecture and just trying to make sure that everybody on the same page. So let us discuss about these beautiful instruments. Okay, what makes Sukuk is beautiful? Okay, for many things. Okay, number one, I'm not going to talk about Sharia compliant and so on and so forth. So all these things are actually quite easy to understand. So what makes Sukuk on paper an extremely beautiful instruments is that number one is actually related to real activities. On paper, if you want to issue Sukuk, it has to be supporting some tangible activities, okay, or some real economic investments, okay, or real investment or real economic activities. So on paper, Sukuk itself can reduce so many problems that we are facing in the world, which are number one, excessive speculations, all right, which is basically killing the economy. excessive leveraging, which is also killing the economy, creating the world a more volatile economy. And more importantly, Sukuk allow you to undertake a long-term investment which is beneficial to the society. Because on paper, that's what Sukuk is all about. It's not being created because it's Sharia compliant. It's actually being created. We have an instrument from Islamic perspective. Second, it also have instrument can address some of actually the global issues. Okay, so that's why Sukuk is actually an amazing product. Okay, and number one, Sukuk is also an hybrid instrument that allow you, to have a combination of debt and also inequity. Okay, so it's not like purely debt, and it's also not like purely equity. Okay, and if you have learned Sukuk in advance, you probably know that there's an asset back, asset base, asset line, and so on and so forth. But one thing in common is that despite all these things, it has to be an halal activity, and it also has to be supported by real investment, okay, or real economic activity. So in other words, Sukuk bring back to the idea of idea of finance, which is we are the facilitator of the real investment. We are the facilitator of real creation of value in the economy rather than a paper value. Okay, so this is actually the beauty of what Sukuk is all about. So if you, and the reason I'm telling you all this is that so that you as a young people, you really understand the fact that we are not doing this because we need another instrument, because bond can actually do much better than what Sukuk can do. Okay, it's much more liquid. The world is actually integrated with the bond market. The law is actually more harmonized. There is a standardization. You have a richer liquidity. That means that if you issue a bond, you can actually tap into global liquidity market instead of Sukuk, where you can only tap into people who actually wants to have a Sukuk instrument, and you don't have to create a new law, and you can actually easily blend into a global integrated financial market. And the reason why we are not doing that, and we want to do this, not because this is Sharia compliant, but more importantly, we want to do this for simple reason is that we actually want to create a better system and an alternative system. Okay, and that's why Sukuk is much more complicated, and it follow a different structure. And this is another beauty about Sukuk. Okay, so you can have a sales structure, you can have a partnership structure, you can have an ijara structure, depends on the need that you want. So on paper, and I keep using the word on paper because you have to understand there is a divergence between what we teach in the classroom and also what is being practiced. Okay, in practice, majority of the instruments still very much similar to conventional bond, all right, or bonds. Okay, and why is that the case? It's a lot similar because we want to have acceptance. Okay, we do not want to actually produce something too new where the market doesn't know how to deal with this instrument. So right now, we are still in the stage where, okay, we want people to understand better about Sukuk. We want to create a market deep enough so that we can withstand the shock into the system. We have enough players so that the trading can take place, so that there will be a liquidity in the market. And then eventually we're going to go into much more higher risk products. So I know a lot of people out there who are very critical about Sukuk. They said, what is so different about this? We are still doing what the conventional is doing. I know, okay, this is a very fair criticism. Even after 10 years of me practicing Islamic finance, I can accept the fact that, the progress of innovation in Islamic finance is actually quite slow compared to what we have envisaged at the beginning of our journey. But we have to also accept that there's so many countries right now are talking about it because the demise or the slow collapse of the global financial system. You think about it, the dollar value is actually slowly shrinking. US dollar is no longer the only superpower in the world. We have now China coming in. And now if you follow the news, you probably know that big economy like Russia, China, India, Brazil, and also South Africa already start talking about, can we start trading using yuan as compared to dollar? And Russian-Ukraine war is also going to be and what we call as an epoch event, where if, for example, Russia wins, and you may even see a new block of currency, a new block of, and we may go back to a system where, you have a balancing system between a US dollar and also other currencies. So a lot of exciting things are happening. So, and we want to be part of this exciting system. we Islamic finance, we want to be part of this. So that's why we actually trying to push harder for countries to really push for a much more stable system. Okay. And if you look at all these contracts, like Salah, Murabaha, Istisna, these are sale-based contract. And then you have Ijara, which is the lease-based, and you have Wakala, which is an agency-based. So why we are trying to talk about all these contracts at the beginning, we are saying it for simple reason is that, unlike bond, which is structured in such a way that you need financing. In the context of Sukuk, you structure, the financing, not because you are borrowing money, you are actually bringing investments. Okay, these are two different terminology. In the context of bond, you are simply borrowing money, but in Sukuk on paper, you are actually seeking investment. You are seeking investment from people, who believe in your project, who believe in your, your vision, and eventually that project will create value, not only for your company, maybe for your country, if you're talking about government bond, or maybe for your society, if you're talking about social bond, or social sukuk, and so on and so forth. And now there are a lot more innovation in the context of wakaf suku, cash wakaf suku, temporary cash wakaf suku, and so on and so forth. So the world is so exciting, and that's why we need young people like you guys to really come in and to join this what we call as adventure. So I'm saying that this is an adventure because whether you like it or not, as young people, what you want is that you want better job, you want better income, you want better salary, you want better life, you want to give something better to your family, to your wife, to your children, and so on and so forth. And you can only have something better if you are able to create values. Okay, and value only come from two things. Number one, it comes from ideas. Then the ideas require financing. So the idea of talking about all the suku and everything is just to ensure that we have a very stable system that can actually finance your ideas. Everything in this world today is ideas. Microsoft is an ideas, Facebook is an ideas, Apple was an idea, even you talk about oil company is also an idea because you need to extract oil and, market it and sell it and so on and so forth. So idea need people, and idea also need financing. So I'm not talking about people because, people, you are the people and you are studying in the university. So we are producing human talent, but I'm just talking about the other aspect, which is the financing. So moving on, why I want to talk about this slide is that, I just want to show you, and I'm sure you have studied in your class, and I don't want to repeat, what sukuk structure is all about. I just want to tell you is that one of the beauty about the sukuk structure is that require SPV. Okay, so what is the beauty about this SPV? All right, so this SPV requires some form of legislation, and the beauty is that, and now I want to come into the role of Qatar, and as a small country, they can also play a role in terms of attracting, issuance in that particular country if their law is actually favorable to, registering SPV in that particular country. Okay, so for example, if you want to become a hub of issuance, you can allow, for example, a better tax initiative, and better legislations, better protections, and so on and so forth. And even you can have a very stable currency. For example, in Qatar, they have a currency which is pegged to US dollar. So for a country who wants to issue in US dollar, they can actually come to Qatar. So the point I'm trying to make here is that maybe Qatar doesn't need the money to finance their project because they have huge amount of surplus. Okay, for example, last year, because of the increase in gas price, okay, the surplus of Qatar was almost about 90 billion Qatari riyals. Okay, and next year they also expect that the surplus will be almost to 100 billion. So they don't really have a money problem. Okay, and this is a country that's so rich that they don't have a money problem. But why they still want to do sukuk? Because they may want to create job and opportunity to become a financial hub. So what they have done, like what Dr. Khalifa have said, what they have done is that they have actually established one institution called Qatar Financial Center. And why they want to establish Qatar Financial Center, or even in Dubai, you probably know that there's the Dubai International Financial Center. Why is that the case? Because GCC doesn't follow English law, okay, or doesn't follow common law. Okay, so many companies would be reluctant to basically come to this part of the world and to issue sukuk and so on and so forth. Because remember, when you issue sukuk, what is the most important thing? You need to have a liquidity. That means when you issue it, you must able to raise whatever money that you want to raise. So if you want to raise 80 billion US dollar, then you must have enough liquidity to raise 80 billion US dollar. So maybe you not have enough liquidity from the market, so you can get the money from the international market. But when you want to get money from the international market must recognize the law and the legislation of that particular country. So if the law and the legislation doesn't really fulfill their requirement, for example, you use civil law, okay, maybe it's very difficult for you to do sukuk. So then you can actually establish like a mini country within the country, like what Qatar has done. So they have established Qatar Financial Center, so that when you register under Qatar Financial Center, so you can actually practice what we call as a common law. So this is the idea of having what we call as a financial center. And the reason why I talk about this SPV, because this SPV, even though your parent company in America or your parent company in Malaysia, you can still go to Qatar and register an SPV there and actually use that SPV as a platform for you to raise money and to tap, for example, in the local liquidity or regional liquidity or even in the global liquidity. Because people, when they invest, they only have one thing in mind. Number one, they want to make money off your investment. And number two, they want to ensure that investment is actually safe and is well protected. So in case you go default, you can actually there's a proper channel that, using proper law, proper regulation, so that, your money is actually well protected according to the international framework. So that is the reason I'm talking about the SPV. Okay. So let me just take a short break and then 1 minute, have a tea, and then I'll continue with the emerging sukuk structures. So far okay, Ali? Mr. Moderator, so far okay?
All right, sir. It's okay.
Okay. All right, I have to check with Mr. Moderator. He's the boss. Okay. All right. Okay. So then what else the government can do? Okay, so now I need to go back to a problem like Malaysia and Indonesia, and many problems in our part of the world. So I can't talk about Qatar now. As I said, Qatar have a very exciting problem. They always have a budget surplus. So what they do with the money, they establish a sovereign wealth fund. I think you probably have heard it, Qatar Investment Authority, QIA. And right now, the investment fund of Qatar is about 400 billion to 500 billion US dollars. Okay, still not as big as Norway, Norway has the biggest sovereign wealth fund, and the amount of Norway is basically 1.3 trillion US dollar. So country like Norway and Qatar, the model is they invest, they buy all big companies globally, and then the dividend, they use it to basically finance the country. So this is actually how they ensure the sustainability of their fiscal policy, so that they don't only depend on commodity resources, but in the long term, they actually diversify the economy. At the same time, they have huge amount of investment outside, and the money is actually being used to finance the people. Okay, so instead of asking the people, the future generation to pay for the current generation, the model of this country is that let invest now and let the return pay for the future generation. Unlike Malaysia and Indonesia, we are a country that borrow a lot. Okay, Indonesia not so much. I think you probably know this better because you studied in your economic class. During 1998, Indonesia was one of the country which is barely affected from the crisis. Barely affected. One of the probably the hardest hit country in the region. And I remember because 1998, I was in the first year of university. There was a reformation. In Spanish, they call it revolución in Indonesia, and also in Malaysia, also they call reformasi, and so on and so forth. Why? Because we have this Asian financial crisis. So Indonesia, after that, have done a lot of economic reform, and they were able to reduce the amount of debt. But now it's slowly increasing because you have undertaken so many infrastructure projects over the last 5 to 10 years. Okay. So the debt level is actually gradually increasing. Okay, so this is where we actually want to come in and say, okay, let's not just go for conventional bond or bonds. Let's go for sukuk. Why is that the case? Because we believe that, unlike bond, which is a lending, and you still have to pay return, whether it's actually performing or not performing. So why don't we create a sukuk structure, which is actually linked to the performance of our underlying economy? Okay, so this is some of the suggestions that we are making. Why don't we create sukuk linked to GDP? So if the GDP is doing better, then we pay more. If the GDP is not doing better so much, then we pay less, and so on and so forth. So what exactly we are trying to say here is that, why don't we combine the elements of equity and also debt? Okay, I know this is not a popular recommendation because the market doesn't like this. The market always wants fixed return. And the reason why the market wants fixed return, because they are so used to fixed return. Okay, let me just give you an analogy, right? You are so used to eat, for example, one kind of food. Okay, and after a while, now you are telling me, okay, why don't you try something new? Okay, but you don't want to try something new. You just want to go something which is very convenient and also comfortable to you and also very familiar to you. Okay, and that's the one of the reason why sukuk is also becoming like bond, because the market doesn't want something different. Okay, and why I'm telling you this, because one day you guys will become a fund manager. You guys gonna basically lead all big institutions. Okay, maybe you guys will become working with the Central Bank of Indonesia or Bank Indonesia. Okay, and you have to understand one thing is that our job as a learned people is to actually create solutions that bring benefit to the country and to the people. And I can give you another lecture how harmful it is, and what the conventional finance is actually doing to the society. Okay, all right. But I'm not going to go there. Okay, but it's enough to say that we all know the problems of the conventional finance. We all know how much is destroying the life of so many people. Although there are so many benefits out of it, at the same time, we have so much of problems out of it. Okay, the inequality problem and so on and so forth. So these are all the consequences of the ribawi problem. So what I'm saying, as somebody who have learned economics a bit more than you guys, is that this is our fardu kifayah. Okay, because we started with reading Quran, and I know this, a lot of people, they just want to start event with starting reading Quran, just to make it look more Islamic. But not many people really believe that Islam is the solutions for everything. Okay, because we always want to go for something which is very familiar. So we need to change that. So that's why I'm talking about this. We need to really think about some of the sukuk structures that actually lot more closer to Islam. And in Islam, you cannot fix the return. You need to have some elements of variability. And that's why some of the suggestion is that, okay, why don't we create an instrument with the return which is linked to the performance of our economy? So if our economy depends on commodities, so why don't we look at the return based on those commodities and so on and so forth? Okay, is there a possibility that you're going to lose money? Of course, there is a possibility, all right? But in life, stock market is the same thing as well. You can make money, you can lose money too. But you're not going to be volatile as the stock market. It's going to be much less volatile, because you think about it. If you don't believe me, you are economics students, right? You go back and look at how many years you have negative GDP in the country. How many years you have negative GDP in the country? Go back to your data, starting from your independence, doesn't matter. I think you guys know better about Indonesian economy. Go back, how many years you have negative GDP? Why a country cannot have a negative GDP? Think about it. Why a country cannot have a negative GDP? They can, but it will not be for a very long period of time. Why is that the case? Because if you continue to have a negative GDP, the government will change. People will not want a government who's not doing well economically. All right. So government is always pressured to have positive GDP. Right. The government is always pressured to create value for the economy. Right. So it's okay for the government to really come up with an instrument one way or another that link to the performance of its underlying economy. Okay, whether it's linked to GDP or linked to commodity and so on and so forth, that's something that actually we can talk about. But why I'm trying to tell you this is that because we want to be away from conventional finance. we really want to kill conventional finance. We really want to destroy conventional finance because this is, A is haram because it's actually ribawi system. Of course, we can learn a lot from conventional finance. So we take all the good things from conventional finance, we establish a system in Islamic finance, and then we go purely Islamic, okay? Because this is our best contribution to Islam in terms of creating a system which is actually based on Islamic finance. So moving on, okay, I just want to skip this one because I'm running out of time. So Sukuk can also be used by the government to really invest in the long-term projects. Okay, can really be used to invest in the long-term projects. Okay, like MRT or like metro, like big highways and so on and so forth. So it really perfect for something what we call as a build, operate, and transfer. Okay, so the government will build it, the government will operate it until it makes profitability, and then the moment it become profitability, reach a level of break even, then the value of the company will become positive. And then once you become positive, then you can start going for IPO or initial public offering, and then you can start selling it to the people. Then the people value will actually goes up. Okay, so let me explain to you what do I mean by that. Okay, so let me just skip all this because I already explained to you all these things, borrowing is haram and so on and so forth. So okay, now this one. Okay, let me just give you an example so that you can understand what is the role of government. But before I talk about this role of government, I also want to make one point which I believe that your lecturer have probably teach you in class. Sometimes government just issue sukuk to create a market, okay, to create a pricing, okay. Because if you want to issue sukuk for the first time, okay, first thing that we'll ask, okay, what should be the risk, what should be the price, and so on and so forth. So normally when you want to do the thing for the first time, the government has to do it for the first time because you learn in economic class, government papers are always risk-free or less risky. So that is become the benchmark for other issuance. So let's say government of Malaysia issue sukuk at the rate of 4%, okay? So if the government rate is 4%, then you add the premium, and then the company will issue, for example, at 5% or 6%, depends on what is the risk premium. So in order for you to determine the premium, you need a benchmark. So the benchmark normally become from the government. So that's number one, which is not part of this lecture because I believe you probably have studied this thing in class. So I don't want to explain the same thing again. Just want to recap why the government need to issue sukuk. And number two, government also need to issue sukuk because you need to create a liquidity. You need to create enough papers so there is a trading. Because if you issue sukuk and there is no enough liquidity, you're going to have a big problem because you're not able to buy and sell. Okay, so when you are not able to buy and sell, there is no pricing mechanism. So when there is no pricing mechanism in the market, so if you buy something, you have to hold until maturity. So when you hold something until maturity, the risk is much higher and the cost of issuance is also become higher. So you cannot have a high cost issuance, then the project will not become viable. Okay. For example, you build an MRT. So maybe what is the IRR for MRT? Maybe like 7% or maybe like 8%. I do not know. So if the IRR is only 8% and you have to issue a paper, let's say for 9% or 10% or even at 7%, you will not be able to actually make that project viable. So you need to keep the cost of financing quite low. And one of the easiest way to keep the financing quite low is to reduce the risk by increasing liquidity. So where the liquidity come from? The liquidity basically will come from the government. So this is another reason why the government have to basically issue sukuk. Okay. So now I'm going to this example before I actually go to the third part. All right. So I have another about 5-10 minutes and then inshallah I will stop. Okay. Because as I said, 30 minutes is my maximum to give lecture. Then we go to Q&A. So let's take this project. Okay. So let's say you are building a new MRT. I know you are building one high-speed railway from Bandung to Jakarta. I know. Is it going through Bogor? Maybe going through Bogor. All right. So it's a president place anyway, so he has to go through the president place. Maybe not. I'm not sure. So let's say you want to build something, Bogor Jakarta highway, or a metro or MRT. Okay, and government doesn't have enough money. So how you can actually issue sukuk? So this is where you can actually use this kind of instrument. And this is actually actual proposal that being presented to Islamic Development Bank. By the way, they didn't accept it because it's too innovative and too risky for them. But actually, this is a great idea that can be considered maybe in the future. Okay, maybe one day you guys are smart enough to, and the market is grown, big enough for you to accept this kind of ideas. So government basically have the land, contractor have the money, maybe a bit of money, all right, and they need, let's say, a lot more money for building these projects. Okay, so rather than going for typical financing, what exactly that you can do here is that you can establish what we call an SPV to issue a sukuk from the investors, and the investors can come from the people of Indonesia. Okay, and you can even go for retail sukuk, for example, like 100,000 rupiah or 1 million rupiah, a very small denomination. So the people put money, the government give the land, and the companies also put some more money in order for you to run this project. Okay, so what is the first thing that you can do? First 5 years, because the project is not ready, you can actually use a simple contract called istisna or salam contract, or you can also do forward leasing, okay, or ijarah. I can't remember the Arabic for it, mawsufa or something. Yeah, a forward leasing, okay, where you can actually pay the payment in advance even though the project is not completed, just like how they build the Zamzam Tower in Makkah. Or you can just build istisna, okay, give the money, you build the project, and then you can sell it to the government at a later stage. Okay, so first 5 years, no income, doesn't matter because you just use istisna. So in the context of bond, is basically what we call as a zero coupon bond. So you will make money at basically at the face value. Okay, so when the project start running, okay, so now the government have to pay back the first investor. So how the government can actually pay the first investor? Because now the government has to buy the projects from the contractor, because that's what istisna is all about. If you remember your sukuk class, that's what your istisna is all about. So the investor give the money to the contractor, and then the government will buy basically the project from the contractor. So the government needs money from the contractor. So what the government will do, the government can actually issue another sukuk, what we call as an ijarah sukuk, because now the project is ready, right? So you can issue an ijarah sukuk, and then you can actually pay the first investors with the second tranches of sukuk, which is what we call ijarah. And how do you pay the return? So now, because the MRT is completed, or the metro is completed, or the bullet train is completed, now there is a revenue. Okay, there's a revenue that coming in. So the revenue that coming in, the rental, that the profit or whatever income that coming in from the running the project can be used to pay the dividend for the sukuk. Okay, all right, until, for example, year 10. Why year 10? Okay, why year 10? Because project like metro or like MRT will take a number of years before it become very, very profitable. Okay, because if not profitable, you can actually not able to go for equity, or what we call as IPO, or a new stocks and so on and so forth. So the moment the project become profitable, then the government can actually convert this suku or ijarah suku into equity. Okay, and this is not something new. You learn in your classes as well, what we call as a convertible bond. So you just convert into shares. So now who own the shares? The people of Indonesia own the shares. So every profit of this company or this metro now will basically go to the people. Okay, so think about it, right? 10 years ago, you don't have the MRT line. Okay, you don't have the metro line, or you don't have a bullet train from Jakarta to Bogor. Now, not only you have the bullet train from Jakarta to Bogor, but that bullet train is actually owned by the people of Indonesia, and that profit also goes back to the people of Indonesia. Okay, by doing this, you can actually make Indonesian people richer, at the same time balance the economy from the very, very rich people. Because if you just continue giving all the projects to elites and very rich people, so what will happen is that all the value that being created will go to whom? Only to the rich people. Okay, and this is something that I personally is fighting as an academician, fighting inequality by promoting Islamic finance, because this inequality is actually very bad. It's getting worse and worse. The rich is getting richer and richer. The poor is actually getting poorer and poorer. Even a graduates like you, you say, okay, I'll graduate. How much are you going to earn? 7 million rupiah, maybe 10 million rupiah. I do not know. Okay, but by the time you graduate, 10 million rupiah, the value is become less and less because of inflation. All right. And then you have to work harder and harder, but your life is not getting better and better because all the value that being created is actually going to the very, very rich. But most of the value that being created are not going to middle income, and very small amount actually going to the lower income. And this is something that we all have to fight. This is something that is our responsibility of using Islamic finance, of creating instrument to fight inequality so that people, especially in the country like Indonesia, Pakistan, Indonesia got how many people? 330 million people? I do not know. Maybe 300 million people. How many million people are actually very, very rich? Maybe 10 million. So how about 290 million people? So are you saying that their life is not really meaningful? In Pakistan, they have 220 million people. Maybe 20 million is okay. How about the other 200 million? Are we not supposed to have our responsibility in terms of helping them? So this is where I think Sukuk playing a role in terms of reducing inequality, at the same time reducing debt in the system and make things better. So what Qatar has done, okay, the last part of my lecture. So what Qatar has done, and I've already given you the role of Qatar in terms of promoting Sukuk. So they have established what we call as QFC, Qatar Financial Center. Okay, and the reason why they want to do that, because A, they don't practice common law. Okay, they practice a different form of law, and they follow more, I think, more inclined to civil law. Okay, but Sukuk is very better of using common law, especially the bankruptcy protection, the regulation, in the case of default and everything. So it's better to use common law. And it's much more widely accepted compared to civil law. So they have established QFC, so you can establish a company in QFC, and whatever SPV that you want to create, and then you can use it as a platform for you to issue Sukuk here. So far, a lot of Sukuk issuance in Qatar are mainly done because of the liquidity. A lot of people wants to tap into the liquidity of Qatar. The banks have high liquidity, the government has high liquidity, and so on and so forth. So number one. And second thing, even the local banks, I think you also study this, Islamic banks also need Sukuk because they need to manage their liquidity. And this is something that you probably have learned in your Islamic banking class, the need to have Islamic instrument so that we can actually manage the liquidity of the Islamic banks, because the Islamic banks need papers, short term, medium term, long term, in order for them to manage their risk, at the same time manage their liquidity, and also to fulfill the Basel requirement of funding ratio, and so on and so forth. So without having an Islamic instrument, it's very difficult for you to have Islamic banking. And one of the solutions that we have done globally is that to establish ILM, I think Institute of Liquidity Management, so that the Islamic banks globally can manage their liquidity needs. But this is actually like a central effort. But the country also is making individual efforts so that Islamic bank can progress, and Islamic banks can only progress if you also have a deep liquidity in the Sukuk market. So this is what exactly Qatar is doing. And they're giving a lot of incentive, especially from tax. Why government can actually play a role in terms of incentivizing people to issue Sukuk. The easiest way is to give tax benefit, tax exemption, stamp duty. Of course, the other thing is that, have a strong currency so that there is a stability in your currency, so that you can issue in dollar, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the role of government. Number one is to create a better regulation, a great ecosystem, and to incentivize by removing taxes, by removing stamp duties, and also have a better law protections. So this is what Qatar has done. And as you can see, majority of the Sukuk that are being issued in Qatar is actually Ijarah Sukuk. And Ijarah Sukuk obviously is very popular because this is the one which is the closest to conventional bond at this point of time. But of course, in reality, we want Ijarah to be different than the conventional bond. So all in all, let me just stop here. Okay, these are some of the issuance. You can see that the market is okay, not like Malaysia. Malaysia is much more robust. We are the biggest. I'm Malaysian anyway, so I have to be proud of this. We are the biggest Sukuk issuance in the world. And the reason why people love Malaysia, because flexibility in law, People know the familiarity, so far there's no major scandal as far default is concerned. The only problem was one MDB, but those are political issues. But so overall, people trust the financial system in Malaysia is very matured. And the beauty about Malaysia is that now, because the sukuk market is so matured, there are enough liquidity, so it's also make Islamic banking growing. Pension fund in Malaysia also can invest in halal investments. And we become the role model of other countries in terms of practicing Islamic finance. So to conclude, Brother Moderator, the role of government is very important. Number one, to create liquidity. Number two, to create incentive. Number three, to create instruments in the market. And number four, to create trust within the system. And number five, to push all the banks to embrace Islamic finance so that we will minimize the market share of the conventional finance. And last but not least, all these things can only happen if you guys, the smart people in the country, I believe EPB is one of the top university. This is what I've been told. EPB, ETB, UE and everything, some of the smartest universities in Indonesia that are going to produce all these talents. You guys must choose Islamic finance. You guys cannot go to conventional finance. You can go for a few years just to learn, okay, but sooner or later you guys must come back to Islamic finance. Why is that the case? Because if all the smart people are going to conventional finance, we cannot compete with them, because end of the day, finance is about ideas, right? Finance is about hard work ethics, ideas, people, and so on and so forth. So we can only compete if we are smarter than them. Okay, you have to remember this. We can only compete if we are smarter than them. So we have to be smarter than them, and the only way we can be smarter than them if the smart people like you guys decided to go for Islamic finance as compared to go for the conventional finance. So with that, let me end my lecture. Thank you so much, Brother Moderator. So I'm open for questions. Salam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, sir. But before we open question and answer, I would like to add information. So, in Qatar, we have a development of sukuk. So in Indonesia, we have a government sukuk as well. So let me explain that. Government sukuk, also known as government Islamic securities, that is securities issued by the government of Indonesia through Ministry of Finance based on Sharia principle as evidence of investment in an asset. So there are several types of government sukuk issued for retail investors in Indonesia that are sukuk retail, and then we have a nation saving sukuk, and also we have cash wakaf linked sukuk, and that's it. And the government sukuk are issued with the aim of financing the state budget that we call APBN in Indonesia, including financing state-owned projects. In addition to that, the government sukuk are also issued to support the development of the Islamic financial industry in Indonesia as well as in Qatar. The issuance of government sukuk has resulted in many infrastructure developments in Indonesia, including bridge in Papua, and then Salatiga Lecturer Building in Solo, Ngawi Toll Road Section 1 Colomadu, Karanganyar, Central Java, and many other developments and infrastructure in Indonesia as well as in Qatar. So what that has the government of Indonesia has done. Thank you, sir. So that is my added information. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. It's very, very insightful. But I guess some of my friends have several questions to ask. So what I'm going to do is to open question and answer time. If you have any question to ask, please just raise your hand with the reaction. Thank you. Oh, so we have a questioner here. The first one is Fiona. Please welcome Fiona. Ask your answer. Ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Brother Ali. Thank you, Professor Eskandar, for the very interesting insight that you gave it to us. My name is Fiona from IPB University Batch 57. I have several questions about Qatar. We know that Qatari sukuk has a strong reputation in the global market, And day by day, the promotion of Qatar Sukuk has become more massive with various international conferences and forums, especially with the 2022 FIFA World Cup. I think Qatar has increased the prestige of the Qatar Sukuk in the global market. So my question is, are there any efforts to improve the regulation and standards of Sukuk in Qatar to maintain the investors and to maintain the market integrity? And are there any challenges or obstacles that face in the issuance and management Sukuk in Qatar this day? Thank you so much, Professor Eskandar and Brother Ali.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. But before that, Dr. Eskandar, sir, I would like to ask: do you want to collect the question, or do you want to answer the question one by one? What would you like?
I think let me just answer one by one, because even within that questions, I think there are 3-4 sub questions. So, and let me answer that one because my memory is not that great anymore. So, yeah.
All right then. Thank you, sir. Please.
No, I think the answer for your question is still very general. It's not just specific to Qatar. I think every country that envision to become what we call as a financial hub is doing what they're supposed to do. Okay, so number one, ease of doing business, and Qatar is really improving the ease of doing business. So they are bringing in talents, number one. Right now, for example, they have relaxed the immigration. For example, if you buy a property, you can also get a residency permit. In Dubai, for example, they have gone for golden visa, automatically 10 years and so on and so forth. So you probably have to understand, Sister Fiona, when we talk about, building something, there are 5 important elements. Number one is the people. So you have to make the people excited about living in that particular country. So Qatar is definitely doing it. And after the World Cup, they're really making use the so-called the vibe of living in Qatar, something which is very good. Number two, in terms of regulation, they are continually improving their regulation. As you probably know, that QFC is working very hard in terms of coming out with new legislations for all the instruments in Qatar. I think they're going to issue a very dedicated Sukuk regulation very soon in Qatar. For onshore and offshore as well. So that's going to basically happen very soon. And I know that personally because majority of the development of Qatar, they follow Malaysia. So they take the law from Malaysia. So pretty much whatever thing that being done in Malaysia, they are looking at it. And I also know that they are coming out with a bilateral arrangement with many countries so that the excess liquidity in Qatar can actually be given to other countries in such a way that there will be some level of bilateral liquidity management, because unlike other countries, and Qatar is actually blessed with liquidity. So I think you all probably know that in economics, having excess liquidity can be a problem as well if you don't have a good investment. I think for football fan, even Qatar is planning to buy Manchester United. So that's how much money they have. A lot of people, they make fun of this, but let me tell you, Pakistan only going to borrow $1 billion from IMF, only $1 billion, but Qatar is buying Manchester United for $6 billion. So actually, if Qatar wants, they can actually save Pakistan. Okay, but instead of saving Pakistan, they actually prefer to invest the money in buying a football club. Why is that the case? Because their money will be protected. There's a better law, there's a better regulation, and so on and so forth. So all the things that being done in Malaysia and in many parts of the world, and also Indonesia is also doing the same thing as well in terms of strengthening the regulation. So when you talk about regulation, we have to understand that the most important thing when it comes to regulation is the issuance process. They have to basically reduce whatever barriers for issuance, especially giving a lot of incentive in terms of tax and so on and so forth. But when it comes to regulation, the most important thing is that when it comes to default, what happened when you default? Okay, so this is the second most important thing, or probably the most important thing. Okay, in GCC, we had quite a number of default, which is not really ring good wide among the investors. You probably know Nakil Sukuk, that's number one. And recently there is a one Sukuk about gas or something. I can't remember the one that quite recently that they say they don't want to pay because it's no longer compliant to Mudarabah, but happened about 3-4 years ago. So this region is not really well known as far the default is concerned. So when Nakil Sukuk defaulted, they were lucky that Dubai was bailed out by Abu Dhabi. And the second one, I didn't follow so much, but there's some kind of helping as well. So this part, they have to actually really improve. In the context of Malaysia, we don't have that kind of problem yet. It's all well protected. The investors are well protected. Even in the case of one MDB, it's actually a sovereign sukuk. The government of Malaysia become the lender of last resort. So we actually pay from the government budget and so on and so forth. So this is the same thing that actually Qatar is actually working on. So that I hope answer your questions.
All right then. Did the Dr. Eskandar explanation answer your question, Fiona?
It's clearly answered. Thank you so much, Professor Eskandar.
Yeah, all right then. So we come to the next question from Ryan. Please ask your question.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Ali, and your amazing explanation, Dr. Iskandar. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as I seen before in your slide, that Sukuk will actually make a good investment instrument to make some projects. And I hear a nice quote from you that to make a value, we need an ideas, and to make an ideas come true, we need an good financing, and I always believe that. So my question is, if someday in the future, me or other of my friends work in some international project with Western people, non-Muslim people that they do not know how sukuk is actually, how can we make them believe that, or how we can make them ensure that sukuk will actually make a good investment, make a good funding to our work, our project, that basically that they do not know how sukuk is, based on your experience that communicating with other Western people. That's my question.
Okay, I think that's a very important question. This can also answer what Fiona asked just now. Another reason why people come into Qatar is that because of excess liquidity in this part of the world, the rate is also cheaper. Okay, so sometimes even you don't believe in Islam, okay, the non-Muslim still wants to issue sukuk because the rate is actually better. So, so that maybe answer Ryan's question. You can actually tap the non-Muslim by saying that, okay, from issuer perspective, you can actually get a better rate from issuing sukuk. But that's a very, low-grade answer. But the better way of saying them, you have to understand is that from both, you have to make the argument from both perspectives, the investor perspective and the issuer perspective. Okay. And the reason why we are pushing for more fixed plus variable, okay, the reason why I say fixed plus variable is that we must have some level of variability in sukuk. Yes, I'm having I'm having a lecture. I come after you. Okay. So the reason why I'm mentioning this, that this is the argument that you can use for the non-Muslim so-called, when you are dealing with the Western. From the issuer perspective, if you go for a variable rate, and I'm sure you also have studied this thing in your classroom, a variable rate will reduce the duration of the instruments. Okay. And I don't have to teach you what is durations. So duration is just a measure of sensitivity to the changes in interest rate. Okay. So when the duration is lower, because you have a variable elements, that means the sensitivity of the changes in the interest rate is also much lower. So Ryan, to give you a simple example, you look at the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Okay. So why Silicon Valley Bank collapsed? Okay, I'm sure you also have studied this thing in the classroom. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed because they have huge amount of liquidity in the bank, all right? Because of COVID, people are not spending, people are putting the money in the bank. Okay, and what happened is that the banks start buying a lot of papers, conventional papers issued by the governments. Okay, and so obviously when interest rate goes up, you probably have learned also that when interest rate goes up, the price of bonds will actually come down. Okay, yes or no? Okay, price of bond will actually come down. So the value of Silicon Valley holdings is actually become much less because of the higher interest rate to combat inflation in America. Okay, so this is what happened when you're just dealing with the fixed income instruments, because you are very much sensitive to the changes in the interest rate. And in the context of bond, for example, if you issue 20 years or 30 years, the higher the duration, the higher will be the sensitivity. So the value of holdings will actually become much, much less if you look it from investor perspective. But also if you're looking from an issuer perspective, having some elements of variable rate will actually protect them, from, having to pay more during bad time, and so on and so forth. So from both angles, having some elements of variability, which is propagated by Sukuk, will eventually make the instrument much more resilient, much more less sensitive to the changes in the interest rate, especially when we are dealing in the global shock and global uncertainty that happening today to fight inflation because of the pandemic, because of the war, and so on and so forth. And also, we do not want people just to print money like US dollars that keep printing money, and in order for them to finance their economy and make the whole world a lot more sensitive. So 3 points. Number one, Sukuk is linked to the real economy, which makes Sukuk much more safer instrument. Sukuk allow some form of variability that make become less sensitive. But the third one, we also, which I said many times, we are not sympathetic about Islam, and we want to push Islam. And we can also push Islam, not just through about, just like what Taliban is doing, and just want to impose Sharia law, like strict and so on and so forth. We can also push Islam by pushing Islamic finance, because whether we like it or not, everyone loves money. Okay, I don't think that there are people who say money is not important. Money is important. So we can speak the language. So we can do da'wah by saying that, okay, let's go one by one gradually, and then they will see the beauty of the Islamic system. They will see that the economy become more resilient, economy is growing, it's a fairer economy. Then sooner or later, all these people, the Western people who are now like suffering right now, I think you probably know this, that, okay, the suicide rate is the highest in America. The depression rate is the highest in Europe, because people are so depressed. But then when they come to Indonesia, maybe, look at how beautiful Indonesia is, how people are so happy. So then they will ask themselves, okay, well, maybe these guys are doing something right. Then maybe they will say, okay, maybe we should learn from this guy instead of we always actually admire and love from the Western world. So this is what I believe. Okay, so thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Moderator, I have another 10 minutes. So yeah, so if you if we can wrap up by 10:30, inshallah. Yeah.
All right, then we have the last question from Aliyah.
Okay,
I like your
thank you for your opportunity, sir. From the development of this sukuk in Qatar, is there any possibility of plan to build project overseas which will later become assets of the state of Qatar, even though the assets are in other countries? And what is the impact of the existence of the Qatar sukuk on the surrounding countries or other countries? Maybe just that.
Okay. I like your name, Aliyah Xavier. That's very international. Okay. I think my answers is still going to be the same. So what Qatar is actually trying to do to become a hub. So when you become a hub means that any countries or any companies can actually come to Qatar to issue sukuk. I still remember some of the company from Kazakhstan came to Malaysia to issue sukuk either in ringgit, and sometimes they issue sukuk in dollar as well. So they can do the same thing in Qatar. They can issue in Qatari Riyal. The reason they can issue in Qatari Riyal because Qatar currency is pegged to dollar. Okay. So I just give you an example, right? Okay. For example, you want to tap in the global market and you want to issue in US dollar because you are a global company. You want to issue in US dollar. You don't want to issue Indonesian rupiah. because you don't want to have, let's say you are a global company, your revenue is in dollars, so you don't want to issue in rupiah, okay? Because the problem is that, you have a mismatch in currency. So you don't want to do that. So you can simply come here, establish a company, create an SPV here. Just a second. Hello, doctor. Can I call you back? I'm just about finishing my lecture. Okay. Sorry about this. Okay. So you can come here. You can establish a company, or you can establish your SPV here. Then you can talk to all the potential investors. You can do what we call as a book building. But obviously right now, a majority of the GCC investors, they always prefer to put their money in the Western world for whatever reason. I have no idea. But slowly they are seeing Indonesia as a potential market. Sometimes they just buy your government bonds or government sukuk. But your private market is not really advanced yet. So maybe once you start having maybe Tesla coming, maybe other companies coming to Indonesia, and then they want to start issuing the sukuk in US dollar. So if they don't want to issue in Indonesia, maybe they can come here and issue in Qatar. So that's what Qatar is actually trying to do, to become something like a global hub, just like Dubai. But they're not there yet. It's a long journey. Right now, they just had one company, American company, decided to come in and issue sukuk in US dollar, and then the reason is not because they want Islamic product. They just want because the rate is much better than conventional, because of the excess liquidity that is available here. Because you have to understand these people, they are not sitting in 100 million, they're sitting in billions, right? So they need the money to go somewhere. Okay, even they buy a paper, they give them a 4%. So like 50 billion, giving them 4% is actually a lot of return. Okay, so this is a great opportunity for your government to think about, how they can actually tap into the liquidity that available in GCC, and there's a huge liquidity. Whether you like, there's a huge liquidity. You take Aramco, for example. Last year, Aramco revenue was 600 billion US dollar. The profit itself was 156 billion US dollar. Okay, and this is Aramco, one company in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, they're one of the largest oil companies. So that is how much money that actually being created in this part of the world. And Russian war is actually helping them, because Russia is selling oil cheaper to them. So they are selling oil in the global market, but they are buying oil at a cheaper rate from Russia. Okay, so this region actually benefiting from this. And this is where the excess liquidity actually being created. And they have to do something with this excess liquidity. So they cannot put the money in Pakistan, because Pakistan is not stable. Like, who wants to put the money in Pakistan, or they just keep fighting? Maybe Indonesia is a stable market. So that's why when I come here, every day you open the newspaper, TV, you will see invest Indonesia, invest Indonesia, invest Indonesia. So why Indonesia is so hungry for these guys' investment? Because they have the money right now, and they don't want the money just go to the Western world. They want the money to go to Indonesia. But you have to show them that, okay, your investment going to be very profitable, viable, then come and issue sukuk here. That's solve the problem. Okay. Yep. One last question. Yeah. Please go ahead, Mr. Moderator.
I think there's no question, but we need something, sir. Your PowerPoint is very interesting, but we want to learn more about sukuk in Qatar and also about sukuk from your PowerPoint. Can we have that PowerPoint, please?
Yeah, you can have PowerPoint, and you can also tell your dean to invite me to Bogor, give me a good trip, then I'll come and teach you guys. Okay. So yeah, you can have my slide, no problem. Yeah, you can have my slide. This is just general information. Yeah. I will email to Dr. Irfan or to any one of you. Yeah, if you can contact me, then I'll send you this material. Yeah.
This PowerPoint to your email, to my email. Can I have your email, please, sir?
Is mrasid, MRASID at hbku.edu.qa.
Sorry, sir. Can you?
Let me write it in.
Right then.
Okay. Where's the chat box here? Chat box here. So may I know like this class is like one class, or like what is this like? Is it like everyone who's studying Islamic economics, or what?
This is
all of you, or what?
Yeah, all of us study Islamic economics.
Nah, cool.
On that.
Okay.
Yeah, we are very need your slides, sir.
Yeah, no worries. There are plenty of things that can be shared, you know. But if you want to learn about suku, you know, I wouldn't say Qatar is the best right now. It's better that you learn about Malaysia. They are much more advanced. Maybe Dubai, they have done a lot more reform in terms of their law and so on and so forth. I'm not an expert in terms of law reform and everything, but the material are there, so you can see systematically what they have done in terms of improving the Sukuk framework. Yeah. And London is another best example. You know, a lot of companies are now going to London also in terms of Sukuk issuance. Yeah. And you can do it through Dubai too, and maybe Qatar wants to do the same thing as well. Yeah. So just before we end, Mr. Moderator, you have to just remember there are plenty of money in the world, and money goes where he wants to go. Okay. So I hope you understand what I hope you understand what I mean. Yeah. So yeah. So you can't follow the money. Money will follow you. Yeah. So if you think you want money, then you need to decide, you know, what it takes for you to create a vibrant ecosystem to bring the money to your part of the world. And I always tell this to my Malaysian friend too. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Thank you for the advice, sir. For information, we are from students from batch 57 and 58 in IPB University. So 119 students here.
I don't know what does it mean by 57, 58. So I guess the university have existed for 58 years. Maybe I assume. I do not know.
Yes, like
that.
that.
The program has existed for 58 years. Is that what it means?
Yes.
Nah, cool. Okay, all the best, guys. I believe Indonesia gonna do well. I have a meeting. I have to go. Ibu Resta, is it? Ibu Fitri.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ibu. Thank you so much.
But
Please.
before we have to give the certificate.
Yes.
Oh, certificate. Okay, the most
Certificate.
important thing. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm very honored.
Professor.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Maybe one day I'll visit IPB to meet your new dean. You know, my good friend, Dr. Irfan Shauki.
Our new dean.
Send my salam to him. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah, he's a great man. Okay.
And Dr.
Thank you,
Daily
guys.
also is here now. His wife.
Is he here now?
Yeah.
Irfan is here.
Dr. Laili.
I know Dr. Laili as well. Yeah.
She is also the lecturer of this subject.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you have a lot of good people there. Yeah, inshallah. Together we make a difference. You know, we make Indonesia great, inshallah.
Amin.
Yeah.
Amin.
I travel to Indonesia quite often as well because I have a collaboration with Bank Indonesia. So yeah.
Next time maybe we have a lecture offline, yeah, Professor?
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah, so
Offline.
we can. I never been to Bogor, so yeah, maybe I can take the opportunity to travel to Bogor. Yeah.
Or
All right.
have a tour to Qatar.
Thank you so
you
much.
you guys can come to Qatar as well. Let me know. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It was been great. You know, it's been
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you so much, guys. Assalamualaikum. You
again.
guys have a good day. Assalamualaikum. Take care. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, sir.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, now Bu Resfa, time is yours.
Hah?
Ya, kembali ke
Ibu
Bu
Laili? Bu Fitri apa Bu Laili?
Enggak, Bu Fitri.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah kita sudah menyelesaikan kuliah tamu. Alhamdulillah 2 mata kuliah sekaligus, yaitu Ekbangsyar dan Ekoreksyar. Insya Allah semoga bermanfaat ya bagi kita semua dan menambah ilmu bagi para mahasiswa dan semuanya, dan semoga mendapat keberkahan dari Allah SWT. Baik, ada yang mau ditanyakan?
Tanya Ibu.
Ya.
Terkait apa tugas deadline jurnal tugas akhir Bu?
Ibu belum dapat jawaban dari tugas akhir dari Pak Irfan. Atau Bu Laili mau menambahkan tentang Ekbangsyar? Tentang deadline tugas akhir?
Ekbangsyat, oh saya kurang tahu Bu. Ekbangsyat bukan dari Ibu ya Bu ya?
Bu Laili enggak ngajar itu ya sekarang ya?
Ngajar itu Bu, Ekbangsyat maksudnya tugasnya koordinatornya Ibu kan ya Bu?
Iya, iya. Cuma
Iya.
mau lihat dulu. Kalau tidak salah itu ya bikin apa namanya tulisan.
Iya, tulisan
Tulisan di
paper ya Bu
jurnal
ya?
ya. Hah?
Iya,
Ya, kalau
paper.
tidak salah di
Deadline-nya UAS ya Bu?
Iya.
Deadline-nya UAS bukan?
Iya, UAS. Coba Rian dicek lagi RPS. Di RPS ada semua.
Ya, baik Ibu.
Ya, untuk tugas akhir. Kalau untuk tugas yang sekarang yang Pak Irfan bilang itu juga Ibu belum dapat jawaban dari Pak Irfan. Kapan deadline-nya? Tapi yang penting kalian sudah menyimak dan segera dikirim email ke dokter barusan ya, dosen tamu, dan kemudian Dr. Eskandar ya, kemudian ditanyakan tentang bahan yang tadi disampaikan ya. Beliau sudah berjanji akan mengirimkan ya. Ali ya, silakan Ali buat kirim ya emailnya ya.
Baik, saya akan mengirim Bapaknya.
Nanti Sabtu ada kelas lagi ya Bu ya? Sabtu webinar internasional pengganti kelas kayaknya Ekbangsyat dan Ekoraksyat juga deh.
Oke.
Prof Mehmet Asutai.
Oke. Jadi mata kuliah Ekbangsyat dan Ekoraksyat ya hari Sabtu.
Iya, Sabtu untuk pertemuan berikutnya.
Jadi kalian catat dan nanti ininya akan di-share ya linknya, link Zoom meetingnya. Mungkin
pembicaranya Prof Mehmet Asutai dari Durham University.
UK ya.
Dari Inggris ya Bu.
Ya,
Iya,
dia mungkin tahu ya.
Bagus ya, kalian wajib untuk hadir mendengarkan, ya, menambah ilmunya. Ada lagi yang mau ditanyakan mengenai deadline tugas yang hari ini? Nanti akan ditanya ke Pak Irfan, ya. Kalau udah ada jawaban dari Pak Irfan, nanti Ibu share ke Rian dan Gozi, ya. Insya Allah. Ada lagi yang mau ditanyakan? Tidak ada?
Sudah cukup Ibu.
Sudah ya. Kalau tidak ada lagi, kita ucapkan hamdalah, alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim atas hasil yang kita dapat hari ini. Dan terima kasih Bu.